Welcome, everyone, to another very special episode of the HR and Payroll 2.0 podcast. I'm Pete Tiliakis, and we are live at the World at Work Total Rewards event here in San Antonio, Texas, on the expo floor. And as always, I'm joined by the legendary Julie Fernandez. Welcome, Julie.
Thanks so much, Pete. And I'm super excited to bring some of my favorite comp and total rewards experts on the whole planet here today, including Chelsea Hamilton, who runs our compensation HR practice. Go ahead and say hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me. And the feeling is mutual, very mutual.
And Sam Thomeier, who I couldn't live without. He handles a lot of our relationships in this ecosystem.
That's
Sam?
right. Yeah. Sometimes known as Julie's handler or the Julie whisperer at times. So, yeah, super excited to be here. It's 2.5 years almost to the day in the making that I'm finally on HR and Payroll 2.0.
Yeah, overdue, man. Overdue.
Thanks for
long overdue.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, appreciate it. This is great.
Absolutely.
Well, it seemed totally fitting because this entire conference and event is all about total rewards, and you guys are the be-all, end-all of total rewards for a number of our clients. And I know this is my first time here. First timers as well to this event.
Yep.
Yeah, not first time in San Antonio, but yes, first time at the World of Work.
We went to the Alamo yesterday, Julie and I did.
Yes,
you did?
I don't know if you know that or not. There's no basement.
Did you take some pictures?
We did take pictures.
Nice.
I don't know if anybody's going to get that reference. Do you guys know that movie reference?
No. What is
Pee Wee
that?
Herman. Remember Pee Wee was looking for his bike at the base?
No.
The base of the Alamo?
The Pee Wee Herman, I don't even know.
I heard there's a thing going on.
His bike is there.
Yes.
Oh.
One of our other colleagues took a picture with it.
I heard
Yeah.
Table that
Who
for
actually
next
is
time.
literally obsessed with Pee Wee Herman.
I heard about
It's
that.
not
I
even
heard about
pretend.
that.
Yeah, it's real.
Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah.
no basement at the Alamo.
Yeah, that's awesome. We're also here. It's a special week where they're celebrating. It's like their quasi Mardi
Fiesta.
Gras, right? Their fiesta.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So a lot of Riverwalk parades and things that I don't know how that's going to work because it's kind of cold and damp
Yeah.
out there.
Yeah.
It's
the
rainy San Antonio.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Spurs won last night.
Oh, did they?
So
Game one.
Yeah.
Another reason to celebrate.
People were nonstop
All right.
honking their horns and blaring music.
I was
so
wondering what that was for.
Yeah.
I figured, I don't know.
I
That
thought
was-
I heard fireworks, so maybe that's what that was.
it could have been. Yeah.
All
There
right.
were
I
some
think that.
burnouts,
Yeah.
all kinds of things. I had a letter from the hotel under my hotel room door this morning apologizing for the noise
No.
Yeah.
and telling
Wow.
me what it was for. It's like,
Never
okay,
apologize
understand.
for I never
fun.
think you should apologize for city pride. You know,
Yeah.
when your city's
no,
rallying
yeah.
around a moment or something. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. You can get to sleep.
I was looking for ambulances, but there were none.
No.
Yeah.
No
It
ambulance.
was just pure fun.
We were
Yeah.
safe.
So,
All good.
Yeah. So look, I think we're going to talk some total rewards today. Maybe we could start off. One of the things I was curious about is just what's hot right now. What are leaders, total reward leaders like? What are they thinking about? What are they worried about? What's keeping them up at night?
I still think pay transparency continues to be a
Yep.
major issue, whatever that means, right? It means something different for every company depending on what their philosophies are. But we continue to see some people who are kind of driving the needle towards more pay transparency and saying, we're going to share everything and put it all out there. I would say there's an equal amount that are still really hesitant. A lot of times that comes down to they're not ready. They don't have their proverbial house in order yet to begin sharing and opening the floodgates. But still think there's still a lot of stigma or nerves right around pay is private. It's meant to be, it's very personal to people. Like we shouldn't be talking about it. And so there's still a lot of working through people's own perceptions that have been developed over their own careers about, what's normal behavior here. And like, are we sure that we want to put this out there? Is this actually a good thing?
Yeah. Some
Yeah.
people think it's competitive IP, right? Like this is what we do for our comp structure. But yeah, no, I hear you. It's causing a lot of angst for sure.
Yeah. It's interesting because
Change is uncomfortable, right?
there's obviously a lot of legislation that's driving some of that, but I think that the philosophy behind it has been kind of bubbling up for a while.
Yeah.
If you'll indulge me, I'll tell a little story.
Yes,
really
please,
quick.
please.
please.
We love it.
I'm a millennial, just turned 40 this year. So I graduated from college in 2008. When I was graduating, they brought a bunch of speakers to talk to us as, folks that are about to be going off into the workforce as new young professionals. They brought an HR professional to talk to us. And one of the things that she said was, what do you think is the easiest way you can get fired? And lots of ideas were going through my mind, Pete.
Could you talk about any of them?
Yeah,
Probably not.
No, not on this podcast. This is for families. And what she said, if you talk about your pay outside of a one-on-one with your manager, that's the easiest way to get fired. And I remember thinking, that doesn't make any sense. There's so much worse that you could do. But then I got into the workforce and I found out she was right.
It's taboo.
Nobody wanted to talk about it. And the only way, but people did talk about it once you gained some trust with your colleagues. It still was
They
pretty
whisper.
shrouded in secrecy. But then you started to realize why people weren't talking about it, right? Because they were afraid that they were going to get fired. They were afraid they're going to be in trouble. So fast forward the clock now, almost 20 years. And obviously there's legislation that's driving some of this change. But I think HR professionals, people in compensation, are also sort of responsible for kind of changing that narrative a little bit. You see it with younger generations too, where it's much less of a thing.
Yeah.
But it's funny because that philosophy or that attitude towards keeping it a secret, the way that it's shifting in the market now, like I said, I don't think it's really driven by the law. I think it's more driven by kind of the culture of HR and how that's evolved over time.
Right.
It's a stigma, right? For sure. Yeah. And don't we pass it on in some ways even in our families, when families don't talk about, not your colleague, I'm your mother or your sister or whatever. And so there's a stigma that goes beyond the workplace, I feel.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. I think the good news is that younger generations are used to having their whole lives exposed to the world online.
Yeah. I think
to
that's
where,
part of it.
why wouldn't you just be transparent with everything else? And share. So, maybe that's helpful for culturally getting change going.
Well, and there's so much information out there that, like it or not, and whether that information is because you have some companies that are trying to lead the charge towards more transparency. So maybe it's not even driven by legislation. It's more of just, this is part of our culture, who we are, we're trying to be more open. The more the cat gets out of the bag, right? There's no putting it back in.
Right.
And so at this point, you as an employer can either show up and meet the moment or you can fall behind. And so I want to say, I think it was someone from PayScale that I heard talking about pay transparency one time, and she compared it to buying a house. And it's like, you're not going to go look at a house and consider putting an offer on a house if you don't know what it's listed for.
Right.
So like, if you're a high caliber employee, and I see it firsthand all the time, like you could have a director level title that like maybe it's still an entry level job, or maybe it's truly a VP level. Who knows, right? Titles mean nothing at this point in time.
Right.
It's like the business card, what you can flash around. Who knows what the expectation is and what the pay is? So to me, I'm thinking like, save everybody the time and the brain damage, right? Be really clear about what is the job that we're looking to fill. How do we value it? And what skill set are we looking at? It helps everybody out at the end of the day.
Yeah. Agreed.
Chelsea, you started out by saying there's this spectrum of folks that kind of have done their comp homework and have this stuff in place, and then others that don't. But I'm wondering how many of those that have had their proverbial stuff in poop in a group, however you want to say it.
I've never heard that
That's a new one.
Yeah, what?
I'm going to use that one.
How many of those need to actually revisit it because of what's happening with skills and how jobs are, not necessarily always junior to full ranking to senior position title?
There's no destination, right? Where you arrive and you're like, okay, comp structure created, transparency efforts complete, we've communicated, and now we're done. You're always hiring people, you're always promoting new people into management. There's always changes that are happening, and even jobs, right? Like we could finish a comp structure project and 5 minutes later, one of the departments decides to do a full restructure. So you're constantly having to keep your foot on the gas, not just with constantly evaluating and tracking, because it's not just about making sure the jobs are mapped appropriately. It's also about the incumbents, the butts and seats, right? Like, okay, here's the jobs that we have. Now we've got 4 levels of it, but we've got everybody in one. Like, where should they be? And at what point do they move from a level 1 to a level 2? And what does that look like?
Yep.
And so over the last couple of years, we've done several speaking engagements around pay transparency, and they're usually to audiences of HR and finance leaders. And I always start the conversation by kind of a common sense approach to it, right? It's like, raise your hand if you agree that it's a reasonable request that employees should generally understand why they're paid, what they're paid.
Yeah.
And
Seems
everybody
reasonable.
raises their hand. And then I'm like, okay, keep your hand up if this happens at your company. And everybody just looks at each other and laughs.
Everybody's
and,
hand
you might
goes up.
have one lingering hand that's up, right?
Yep.
So it's such a common sense thing. Everybody wants it for themselves, wants it for their company, but it's so much easier said than done because the execution is where things fall apart. And in companies where things are always changing, it's like you never feel safe enough to be like, okay, we've reached the point where we're comfortable putting it out there. So
yeah. Well, it's got that overlying overlying cloud, like you said, of culture of secrecy. And yeah, you can imagine, like, I came out of the military very young. My HR career started in the military. I was in a shared service center auditing HR data, very formative. But we had, if you know the military, it's all very much based on your rank and time. And it's public information. Everybody knows what everybody makes, which I thought was really interesting. And that would not work everywhere. I know that.
Yeah.
But you know what? It was never a There was it just wasn't a thing we talked about.
Yeah.
It was, you knew if you.
But because it was known.
It was
not
known.
Because it
You
was
earned
secret.
this.
That's it.
Didn't matter whether you're male, female, whatever the case might be. If you had this rank and this time, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's refreshing because that's just out of the way. Now we can go deal with all the other stuff.
That's exactly it. So we literally have a business case slide that we put at the beginning of each one of our results presentations. And when I get to the right side of it, I make a joke that it's my dream world. And it sounds ironic as the leader of a compensation practice, but my dream world is you're almost taking compensation out of the conversation. And what I mean by that is you're being intentional with your process, right? So like you are using market data, you're organizing and structuring your system, and the same set of rules applies to how you're handling every pay decision.
Yeah.
Cool. We've done that. Now we're going to communicate it out. And so what that means is it's taking away from this perception that my employer is doing as little as they can get away with, right?
Yeah.
We've inserted some intention and some structure behind this. So here's what you get now and here's why. Here's what you can expect over time. And so then people just show up and they feel valued and they do the work that you hired them
It's not
to
a
do.
game.
They're engaged.
It's not a game anymore.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've heard it said from HR professionals that like, it's like, oh, we're, what can we get them at? Like when you're talking about salary negotiations and stuff. And it's like, that seems a little disingenuous just to begin with. But back to the point too in the beginning where, 20-ish years ago, it was completely shrouded in secrecy that no one's talking about at all. Like the fact that we're here today and we're having this conversation is obviously a pretty big leap. And the data supports it too, right? So PayScale's newer survey probably came out, although I can't reference that one. But the one from last year, there's like over 50% of polled HR practitioners were saying that they were providing training on communicating salary, communicating compensation, having those kinds of open conversations with managers so that they could have these types of conversations with their employees, preparing them for a world where pay transparency is a little bit more ubiquitous.
Needed. It's like poor performance. Like no manager, no person wants to, really have to get in and address poor performance or poor pay.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be poor. It can be just a coaching and an educational moment, right? That's what it's supposed to be.
So I have a minor in psychology, and I never really envisioned how I would use it. And now there's so much of compensation and rewards in general that is psychological, right?
Yeah.
We're trying
emotional.
At the end of the day, you have to pay people, right? So is it an expense? Of course it is. So if you have to pay them anyway, shouldn't you put some thought into like the message that you're sending and the behaviors it's going to drive? And if you do that, you can leverage it and tap into the fact that everybody that you're hiring and paying, they're humans and they have emotional reactions, especially to things as stressful and as important as compensation can be. And so I think that, Julie, what you're saying, to me, it comes back to this overall aversion that we have to tough conversations. And even the way that they're framed is kind of this like inherently pessimistic approach, right?
Yeah.
It took a lot of time for me over my career to receive feedback as a gift, right? And not be like, oh, I'm getting in trouble. No, it's like I don't want to be the smartest person in any room. I want to surround myself with people who can identify opportunities and help me continue to get better. And so, Julie, to your point, it's like a performance issue happens over time, right? With it not being addressed. And then it is contentious and it's a surprise. Whereas if you are willing to stay connected and have those conversations with people along the way, maybe it doesn't get to that point.
Yeah.
And that's always the goal.
Yep.
And the same's true with compensation conversations, right? Maybe the answer is not, hey, Pete, you're right, you're underpaid, I'm going to give you a raise. Maybe it's, hey, you're actually paid really fairly, and here's the data that I've looked at and why I feel really confident about that. And maybe you walk away being like, man, I wish I would have gotten a raise, but I understand it better.
Yeah, that's the transparency
the best
part.
outcome.
Yeah, that's the transparency.
And I trust you more as an employer for being willing to tell me something that I didn't want to hear and stand in it and give me data to back it up.
Well, sometimes I think it's a cultural maturity of the organization's own culture.
Absolutely.
Like you were talking about what you like having people surrounding yourself. That's an emotional maturity that some cultures in their organizations haven't arrived at. And then it's hard to have these conversations if they're not doing it in the
I think, too, companies are becoming more agile, right? We talk all the time about agility drivers and how to be agile. And so I don't think that your typical employee isn't really tuned into the fact that, well, my pay may be different because of my geography and where I live, unless they're going to make a dramatic move to California from, the Midwest or something. They may not be in tune to the fact that we had an M&A and two entirely different organizations came together, and that requires some alignment and level setting. And there's probably a million other situations, right, where an employee could reasonably go, oh, wow, I never even thought that was a factor. Or maybe it's not until you actually undertake some work to get your house in order.
I mean, that underscores, too, why organizations need to be proactive about putting together philosophies and communicating these things out and saying, like, look, this is what the data tells us, and this is the way that we handle these situations. Like if you live in San Francisco and you make a certain amount of money based on the area, and then you move to, say, Pittsburgh, the San Francisco of the East,
right?
And obviously you're gonna be paid much less. Like those are two different markets with two different costs of labor, and two different costs of living.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a whole different the cost of labor versus cost of living explanation. So to your point, Julie, of how do you educate people on what's different about those two things and how are they different because they're not the exact same thing?
Yeah.
Well, and it comes down to ultimately
remote work showed a light on that.
That's true. Yeah,
100%. It's the whole nature of how you compete for talent, which is what your comp strategy is aiming to do, right? Has been flipped on its head. Sam and I did a presentation late last year about remote work, and it was something like super cool, like where you work matters, or does it? But the
Very cryptic.
The idea is, even if you don't have remote employees, you're competing with remote employers, especially for specific, like certain types of work. So it's
around the world, by the way.
Yeah,
around the world.
Defining your market, it's not just, okay, well, what buckets do we fit into? It's where are we competing for talent? And you have to be honest about that, because if I can work remotely, which some people like, most the data that I have seen shows that it's a small margin of people that actually want to be remote. Most want to be hybrid. But if you get to work remote and you can make the same or more because you're working for a company that's based out of San Francisco but living in Pittsburgh, or depending on what their approach is, you've got to think about it a lot more broadly than in the past.
That's a whole other subject too, but the return to office phenomenon that's now happening, 6 years past COVID, that's a whole other thing too. And it's like probably a whole other subject, but it's related because now you've got, almost 90-ish% of executives are like, people need to get back in the office. And they think that everybody wants to just work remotely and be hidden. But in reality, 3/4 of people just would prefer to be treated like adults.
Yeah.
Like if I need to stay home because my dog is sick or my
novel
kids
idea,
are sick,
right? Hiring adults.
They don't like, it's only like 20% of people want to be remote full time. You know what I mean? And there's a huge, there's a chasm of disconnect between the people making the decisions and the people who are working. And that needs to be addressed as well too.
Yeah.
But that's a little bit outside.
Psychology. It spotlights this, like there is a trend when you see organizations that have a culture of mistrust. They don't want people working remotely because they don't believe that equates to actually working, right? They're finding ways to track it and make sure that people are actually working when they're at home, if they're not in the office, and you can have your eyes on them. It's the same way, like the culture of mistrust kind of permeates into how they handle compensation, how they do other things. And a big part of what we coach on is, hey, you should create the culture and the comp practices that align with that to attract and engage the type of talent that you want. And to me, like, I don't want talent on my team that I feel like I need to babysit, that I have to micromanage. If I have someone who's working remotely and I'm worrying about if they're actually working, it's a performance issue. And if I have clear expectations outlined, then I can measure and speak to if someone is having a performance issue, and it has nothing to do with where they're doing the work. And so the people that show up like that don't want you coming after them if they leave 45 minutes early to go to an after school program for one of their kids or something, right? It's like, I'm going to get the job done.
Yeah, if the work's getting done, the output. We talked about that on the other show. The output is key, right? And skills and output, I think is where you got to focus. So. Yeah. Can I ask you what do you think about, like, what's the change management underpinning here for a corporation that might be going through, or big or small, that might be going through trying to mature themselves? Like, what would be the kind of change management elements that they need to think about?
I think first and foremost, you don't have structure in place from a compensation perspective. If you haven't built a structure for all of your jobs and evaluated your employees against it, I think you've got to do that before you can do anything else, because you've got to understand what you're up against, what you're dealing with.
Right.
And so in order to be able to communicate to people and say, hey, here's our philosophy and here's where we're at right now, here's where we're going, you've got to have that data and information. So typically what we'll do is we'll meet with leaders first, one-on-one, and figure out kind of what their wish list, what's your like if money's not an object, right? How competitive do you want to be? How do you define your market? All the things. How transparent do you want to be? What's your end goal?
What do you want to be when you grow up?
Can't get there overnight.
That's what I like.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly. So we identify that, and then the next step is, okay, well, let's figure out where we're at right now. And then how do those two meet? How far are we from where we want to go? And then once you've identified kind of what the gap is, then you can start building your communication strategy. So you're keeping it pretty close up front and involving your stakeholders, right? And anyone who's going to be involved in that process. And I always recommend in that process, it can't just be done behind closed doors with the HR team. You've got to have leaders involved. You've got to have them contributing and weighing in so that they understand it and that they buy into it, because any comp strategy that gets launched by HR and then, you know, your frontline supervisors get questions and they just say, I don't know, go ask HR.
Yeah.
It's not going to work, right? Everybody's got to be on the same page. Right.
Yep.
You've got to understand, and you've got to have an answer that says, hey, we actually benchmark jobs once a year. We just finished. Here's what we're actually benchmarking it against. You know, like, you've got to be able to, at least at a high level, answer and field some of those questions all the way out onto the front line. And so to me, that's the next step, is once you've built that structure, then it's starting to do some of the training that Julie was talking about earlier, starting at the leadership level, going down through middle management, all the way to frontline supervisors. And you've got to do that on a regular frequency. What you're communicating and sharing now versus in the future kind of depends on what you find.
Yeah.
So, like, if you find that there's all kinds of inequities, you know, that we've been hiring people based off of what it takes to get them in the door, or if there's been favoritism, or whatever the reason is, right? And the bigger a company, the greater the risk for those types of things to sneak in.
Yeah.
You have to be cautious. You can't just start sharing and touting these things until you've figured it out, because ultimately people are talking behind closed doors. But when you start advertising it, or you put the salary ranges on job postings, and I see it and I'm like, wait, the range starts at $75,000, but I'm paid $68,000. That's not fair.
Yeah.
Those are the things that you've got to make sure that you don't overstep.
And it shouldn't come down. I think we talked about this. We implied this a little bit. It shouldn't come down to who negotiates the best.
Right.
To your point, if a business is like, hey, we got one over on this one, we got it cheaper than we would have. Who wins in that?
The other thing is, I don't think, you tell me, but do a lot of employers come in and say, I want to pay at 100% of market? Or are most of them like, no, I kind of want to pay at like 80% of market, or some portion of market?
What I would say, my personal view, is that any market data point from the 10th percentile to the 90th is market. It's just, who is it market for?
Right.
And so a lot of times people will think that the goal, and employees in particular will think, they see a range and they either think they deserve to be paid at the middle of it or at the top of it.
Right.
And nowhere in between. Any salary range we build represents market data. It's just, if it's more towards the beginning of the range, if I'm brand new to a job, I'm a people manager for the first time, it makes sense for me to be paid somewhere in the first quartile of that range.
Right.
And that's how you grow and develop people too, right? Without having to promote them every step of the way. The longer I'm managing people, the more that I stop relying on my supervisor and having questions every 5 minutes, move me more into the second quartile, closer to the midpoint.
Right.
If I'm happy being at that manager level and don't want to continue climbing, once I've been doing it for 20 years, and I'm really seasoned, I'm mentoring other new managers or supervisors, put me near the top of the market, at the top of the range.
And I think if people observe that, all you have to do is bring in a competitive market range, and then they pop you up to whatever it is, that also crushes your strategy, right?
Yeah. I also think, Sam and I, several years ago, created this idea of the magical market unicorn, which is to say, like, there's this one single data point that if you're an HR generalist, all HR generalists should be paid $65,000 in every location, every company size. And so it is coming back to some of these just reasonable, common sense things to explain to people, kind of like, Julie, you were talking about earlier of, hey, if I'm, like, let's use an HR director as an example. If I'm an HR director on a team of 3 for a company of 100, compared to an HR director on an HR team of 40 plus people, right? A much bigger company. Those are not the same job.
It's not. Even with industry to industry. I mean,
right.
A director, when I was at Disney, a director in media and entertainment is pretty much a vice president in any other sector.
Yeah.
And the way we compensated them was very just unique, right? And we had so many different things we had to deal with. But yeah, I don't think you can. I mean, now you shouldn't be looking. I think roles, titles are. It's almost arbitrary. It's really the skill.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in the beginning, right? It just,
We talk all the time on the payroll topics about the job having fundamentally changed. And when technology is enabling payroll calcs, payroll, the running of payroll, and the job becomes materially different, and you have to be that knowledge worker. So if you used to pay your payroll people $35,000 a year, you might not maybe should be surprised if they're $100,000 a year role now, for example. And that's happening all over companies.
It is. Yeah. Skills pay, right? I mean, yeah. So what happens next? I mean, where do we go from here? Like, I mean, is AI going to solve some of these problems? Is it going to make it worse? Like, what are you guys seeing in that regard? I feel like the back end, to your point, having your data, knowing your bands, having good information about the market, right, is key. But what else can you do to help?
There's interesting tools out there that support some of the things like job matching and benchmarking and just pulling massive amounts of data and moving massive amounts of data. There's some tools that I've seen where what they're telling you is we have this AI tool that will go and scrub the internet of every single job posting that there is, and we can aggregate that data to show you what salaries look like. But this is a caution to folks out there that's an interesting tool, but job postings are advertisements.
Right.
So that's like...
And the ranges are insane. I've seen some ranges where it's like, all right,
200% spread.
It's so ridiculous.
And they're not telling you what the person actually got paid.
Right.
They're telling you what someone offered, and it could be in a ridiculous spread, like you said. So
or even geographies. I don't know how sophisticated you're seeing, but, geographies and
so that's one
industries
thing.
And size.
Totally.
And again, just the legislation's not going away, right? It's over half the states now that have at least pending legislation at the state level. It was introduced at the federal level, but unsurprisingly, it hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah. Do you think we'll get there eventually, though? We'll have a federal, sort of like a federal minimum wage kind of a directive?
The current administration, obviously it's not a priority. And and I think it's worked to a certain extent at the state level. So, but my point just being that it continues to grow. Like if you looked at if you look at a map today, you'll see a bunch of states that have it. You'll see a bunch of states that have pending legislation. If you looked at it 15 years ago, it was blank. It was just a map of the United States.
Yeah.
So
it's becoming table stakes. Like there's enough of them out there. And then the first thing that came to my mind when you asked the question is more of like employees using AI. And so like in some ways there are AI tools that is making it easier for comp professionals to manage, but they're also facing more questions than ever of, hey, I just, asked Microsoft Copilot how much my job title is worth. And I can't remember who made the post. It may have also been someone from PayScale, but they were basically saying they had done their own research where they basically asked one of the different tools, how much is a specific job worth? And then they added some demographics into it. Like, so, hey, I'm a white female. How much should I be paid for this job? And then you change the demographics, you ask it, and suddenly the value is smaller for like a white female in that same job. And so I just think more than ever, there's all kinds of information out there, good, bad, different,
ugly,
right? Yeah. And so you don't have to pay the highest out of everyone for any given job. You just have to do it in a way where you can play ball. It's in alignment, it's defensible with data. And the how, more so than the how much, I think, goes a long way in creating actual sticky employment because it's creating connection and trust. And that's still pretty rare, honestly. When you see companies that have figured this out and they've created that culture, you can feel it pretty quickly, and you can see it permeates past just compensation. You feel it in how they're managing performance and staying on top of that with each other. And that translates directly to productivity and better business outcomes.
Yeah.
And so that to me is like AI is going to put a lot of good and bad information out there that people are going to have questions about. So it just underscores the importance of HR people to be prepared to field those questions and answer them in an honest and compelling way. And then to Sam's point, I think there are several tools out there and they're getting better every day.
Yeah.
And there are new ones every day of ways that you can leverage them to manage your compensation processes, especially if you're part of a small team. You know, it's a standalone full-time job. A lot of the companies that we work with don't actually have anyone doing that job.
Yeah.
They're doing it alongside 16 others. So there's
part-time. It's part of one of the hats they're wearing.
Yeah, there's got to be tools out there to even make this possible.
Yeah.
I think it's also important, that there are different questions being asked of consultants and folks that work in this field. Like, when you were talking about the different state rules versus the universal rules, in payroll, we have clients that are looking at, should I have just one universal PTO payout policy, or do I need to contemplate state specifics? I mean, whether it's leaves or whether it's the compensation base or the different programs, like those conundrums are being set up all over the place, and you might want to have a universal thing. But if you have a universal thing, you're probably going to have a bigger base pay across your organization, right?
Yeah.
Simpler, bigger, those trade-offs.
Yeah.
I think you might have said this maybe collectively along the way, but what are the key characteristics that you notice of companies that are really getting this right and making this transition to a more transparent, equitable comp approach or total rewards?
This may be too woo-woo of an answer.
Yeah. No, seriously though. The
first word that pops into my head is courage. Honestly, or like a lack of, like, they're unwilling to be complacent. They're driven by leaders who are not just putting things into autopilot. I think that's what happens a lot of times is the danger zone is either, people that are just comfortable doing things the way they've always done it. Cause if it's not broken, don't fix it. I've had leaders tell me, hey, if people aren't asking me about pay, why would I bring it up?
Yeah.
Why, like, there's other things I can do with my time. So I think that when you have courageous leaders, especially, and we work with a lot of them where they're like, this is going to hurt. We know it. It's not going to be fun,
that's
but
the change part.
But it's necessary.
Right.
And I feel like that's one of the things that's most notable is the leading with courageousness, understanding that it's necessary. Again, it's becoming table stakes.
Yes,
there will be a point in time where people are not going to apply for jobs if they don't know what it's valued at.
Yeah.
And
it's fair.
And the data backs that up too, right? It's upwards of 85% of people polled say they won't even apply to a job if there's not a salary range on the rec. So you could be inadvertently hurting yourself as an employer by limiting your candidate pool by
100%.
not, by being complacent or just, avoiding it.
Yeah. I want to kind of talk about the other lens of this, right? The worker, right? Especially the new grad or any of us who are out there navigating there's a lot of folks that are, in the market now, unemployed and looking for jobs. I work with veterans and spouses who are coming out of the military and help them with their career transition. And the answer that I would have given them or a young professional trying to enter the workforce 5-10 years ago about salary negotiation has changed the way I would advise them. What would you say to that new grad or someone new or someone who's lived the old way and now is kind of in the new world? Like, how would you tell them to be successful as a candidate on the other side of that? Any advice?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, my advice a year or so ago would look very different than now because the market has changed in a lot of ways. And so I think it would be very personalized, honestly, because it depends on everybody's current situation, right? How much wiggle room or buffer, how much of a safety net do you have? How urgent is it that you find a job? Because the reality is, in some cases, in some industries right now, I mean, I have seen several really high caliber professionals that were unfortunately let go as part of a reduction in force or something like that. They're really talented people, right? But there was just no longer a space for them. I would offer that some of those we witnessed firsthand were from overreactions when the market was high.
Right.
Like you enter the name your price candidate experience and people were leaving to get double their pay somewhere, and that was never sustainable. And you create these unrealistic expectations where now if I'm that person where, well, suddenly my job went from 50 grand to 100 grand, now I believe that's what my job is worth.
Yeah.
Because this one employer was willing to pay it. So that's maybe one thing I would offer is leverage the tools that you have to try and get a solid understanding of what your job is truly valued at. And then to me, when the market starts to head towards where it is now, I feel like that's where employers have the biggest opportunity to show who they are. Right.
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah. And it's kind of that like you're forced to show up as your best when you're trying to get people towards you. But what do you do when things are cooling off? And this is where I think that people with that long-term plan really shine.
Yeah.
Because they can highlight things like people-centered decisions. It's not just about paying you well. It's not just about providing benefits that take care of you and your family. It's also about making responsible business decisions that create that sustainability of the business and job security. So to me, again, it comes back to as an employee, as a prospect or someone who's looking for a job. I think to the degree that you can be picky, those are the things that I'm looking for. And I'm trying to demonstrate myself as someone who has some of the soft skills that I think people are looking for, right? In a time where workforces are shrinking, it's like businesses are always trying to see how much can they get out of every hire that they have. If they're leaning out a team, they want the sharpest, the most curious, the like unicorn talent. And so if you can position yourself as someone, like I joke about hiring unicorns on my team all the time. I need someone who understands data, but they can't be someone who's just a data person and doesn't know how to speak to people or that can't convert it to bigger picture. I need you in the forest. I need you up in the tree. Like I need you everywhere, right? And in 16 other places. And so I think if you can spotlight a diverse set of skills and kind of being some of the talent we've talked about throughout, like I think that's what would stand out to me.
I would say that culture matters too, and like fit matters, and you got to think about that stuff, as part of the kind of total rewards picture, right? I mean, there's obviously benefits and other things to think about, but there are organizations that have missions that you might be, behind. You talked about working with veterans and things like that. Like there are things that are important to you personally, that might fulfill your life more.
Right.
Those are, pursue those as well, rather than just thinking about dollar signs.
Yeah, there's an opportunity to do your own soul searching and valuation, right? Of what is important to you. Watching my Gen Zs go through it, they actually knew whether they, valued every other Friday off or, some other thing. And so that's super important. And then I can imagine there's just so much to learn by asking questions and being comfortable to engage in a conversation about it. Yeah. I mean, learn before you get yourself hired, whether or not, your employer is going to have this secrecy, kind of taboo culture, or whether they're also embracing having a legit conversation about stuff.
I love that. So, because again, at a certain point, you take a job so that you can get a paycheck. Right. So there is a point where it's like, all right, if things are super tough, you've got to take what you can get. I feel like what you're talking about is spot on because it's what's best for everyone and it's what's going to last. And sometimes that might mean, hey, like the opening that exists at this company right now is a little lower level than what I was hoping for. Yep. But I vibe with the interview process, what they've shared, this company. Like I'm looking at the long game. And so sometimes that's your foot in the door, right? And I think that those things that you're talking about are so important to identify if you're looking to go somewhere and stay there. And I think a lot of times interviews are viewed as, the company's trying to decide if they want me, but it really is bi-directional.
It's the other way too. Yeah. I think when I talk to veterans about this, so many people, especially younger people who are less mature with the workforce, they are purely focused on salary, right? As that sort of tip of the iceberg. But I'm like, you got to look below the waterline because there's a lot of flexibility enablers and intangibles, growth opportunities and other things that you have to, and total comp. You have to, for example, working at Disney, heavy on the benefits, right? I mean, there were so many benefits they offered us that were just something other employers couldn't offer that had a really rich, getting into the parks, right? Or having that monetary value that was greater than salary. But in the total, you add it all up and it's like, wow, I'm actually getting a lot more than maybe what the market might say about my salary entirely. So I don't know that sometimes the job seekers, the younger, newer job seekers, especially military coming in, they don't know what they don't know. And they're focused on that salary, but then there's all these other opportunities and things that are under the waterline that they need to calibrate into that.
That's the hardest part about all of it is you have all of these different, generational assumptions that people make, but also just within the same generation, there's differences in what people value.
Right,
and
exactly.
So it's figuring out how to strike the right balance of what do we offer that checks the most boxes for the most people, and it all comes back to communication, right? I obviously value benchmarking. But who cares if you're doing what everybody else does if your employees don't actually value it? Right. So it's like that's one step. The other step is I was on an HR roundtable last week, a couple weeks ago with some folks out of Phoenix. Mm-hmm. And someone brought up a really interesting benefit idea. And the idea itself didn't get a lot of support. It was very unique and different. However, the process she followed and the way that she outlined it, she was like, well, I had this idea that worked well at my last employer, and so I brought it here. I talked to leadership first and asked if it was interesting enough.
Tell us the idea. What was the idea?
It was, I want to say it was ketamine treatments.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Yeah, so they had covered that in one way or another. But essentially what she did is she had seen it work at another company. She brought it up with leadership to see if leadership was even going to allow it, buy into it. And then the next step was they kind of introduced it to their employees through some focus groups and a survey to see if there was an appetite for it. And then they launched it. It was super successful. So now she's kind of tracking what the wins are and the ROI from it and figuring out how to continue to push the needle further and build on it. And I'm like, that is it.
Out of the box thinking.
It's stakeholder buy-in so that it's not HR on an island.
Right.
It's employees confirm interest in it and perceive value, and then measuring, okay, well, everybody said they like it. Do they actually? Like, do they roll it out in a way where they're using it and it's helping?
Nice.
And so I feel like it comes back to communication.
Yeah.
I think that's become a very big part of Total Reward Leaders, mission these days with all the expansion of wellness type stuff, all the benefits and voluntary things, and just trying to appeal to so many different generations of value out there. I can only imagine, Chelsea, how often you get somebody who wants to talk about that and they don't have their basic poop in a group, right?
That's so it, because it doesn't, like, the differentiators don't matter. If your comp, and I would even say your comp and your primary health and welfare benefits, if those are aggressively trailing the market, you don't get to graduate to talking about differentiators. Like, you can't tell me we're a family here and we value you, but meanwhile, I feel like you're taking advantage of me with my pay or, you know, but I think also people need to understand that they do impact one another. So if we decide to pay in the middle of the market instead of leading it, but then our benefits, like our health plan is top of the market, then you need to be able to connect the dots to explain to people that I actually keep more of my paycheck because, maybe the medical plan is 100% paid. Like, because people don't think about, my husband is the repeat offender here. Like, he took a different job a couple years ago and he didn't even ask about their benefits. I'm like, I take this personally. Like, benefits matter too.
Yes.
So I say that in jest, but the point is, I think there's still a lot of education and re-education and just reminding people to view the entire picture like you were talking about.
Agreed.
Hey, listen, that stigma we talked about at the beginning, employees have it too because they're afraid they don't understand anything in this space.
And most people are afraid to rock the cart when you're trying to be a good candidate and put forth the best foot. Right. I completely understand it, but then they leave a lot of value on the table, so hopefully we get it, we get there where we need to be. But look, this has been fantastic. You guys have some great insights. We need to make this more of a regular thing. Maybe you guys come back for an annual Total Rewards and Comp discussion we do.
Yeah.
But where can everybody get in touch with you? Where would you want to be engaged?
LinkedIn is probably the best. For me,
I would agree.
Yeah. Absolutely. And HaronPalmer.com, we'll make sure we share that. But
there's some links and maybe even I think you've put out maybe an infographic or an article or a newsletter. You do have a newsletter that you guys
And you guys do spot research all the time on these topics too. So we try to share those, but look for that. But look, guys, thank you so much. It's been great having you.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.